I'm Mr. Patten from Cornerstone Baptist Church, and I'd like to share some things from 1 Samuel 17. I wonder how many out there, if there's anyone out there who has not heard the story of David and Goliath, Christian or non-Christian. It's a fun story, but it's more than that. You know, we're familiar with the idea. Everybody knows the account of a young guy and a giant monster that he has to stop and kill. And I think that's all most people get from it. But let's see what else we can see in this story. Starting at chapter 17, verse 3. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And commentary says between 9.5 and 10.5 feet. And he had a helmet of brass on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, which is made up of pieces of some sort of metal. And this coat was over 150 pounds. And he had greaves of brass on his legs and a target of brass between his shoulders. So he had something on his back so nothing could stab him. And he had sheets over his legs so that no one could, because if you cut someone's leg deeply, they can't move around, they can't fight. And he had a helmet of brass, and he had greaves of brass on his legs, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. And his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, Why are you come out to set the battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and you servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. So what's going on? Normally, two battles would fight each other, and Israel came out ready to fight. And the Philistines said, No. We have this man that's unusually large. So there's an advantage for us. If it's just man against man, we have a huge advantage because he's almost twice as big as anyone else. The two armies came out. They're somewhat evenly matched. So they took advantage of this, and they said, We're not going to fight you by army. Send your best man out, and we'll see what happens. In verse 23, as he talked with them, behold, there came up a champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. So the first thing I'd like to point out is we cut some things out so this doesn't become overly long. But at any rate, David is sent there. He's not in the army. He's too young. He's between 18 and 20 years old. And he's not of great stature. He's kind of small. He doesn't look like someone that's been doing heavy work. And the Bible doesn't indicate that he's frightened. Everyone else is terrified. But he just sees a problem. I have compassion on these people, on these soldiers. These brethren of mine are all terrified. And that's what he was worried about. He's worried about them. He's not worried about himself. In verse 33, and Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said to Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and I smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. That's the second thing that concerned him. Besides his fellow Israeli soldiers who were going to die or be wounded, he was really concerned that this man had defied and tried to defile the army of God. And that's what it is. Israel, it's the army of God. And that's who they serve, and that's who they trust in. David has thought back to times when God helped him as a shepherd. He knows as God helped him not just then, but God will always help him. God took him under his wing and fought for him. And I cannot help notice he seems absolutely certain. Not maybe God will deliver me, but he definitely will. He took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near to David. And the man that bare the shield before him, and I'm noticing here, besides the size of Goliath, notice there's 2 of them. He has a helper. David doesn't get a helper. In verse 42, and when the Philistine looked out and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. That's what I was saying before. He looked like he's someone who had been indoors and not doing heavy work. He looked weak. And he felt insulted. Someone of my stature, I'm not going to do battle with this puny little boy. That's how he was. And he was angry about it. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, his false gods, Dagon. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the living God, the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. He has absolute confidence in his God. And they say there's no confidence in the flesh, right? Don't trust in flesh. And this shows the wisdom in that. What faith can he put in a small frame compared to that massive oak that is Goliath? He is beyond strong, and he's practiced in the art of killing. And I'm thinking of a verse in Hebrew. It's 11:6. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. So if we say, well, maybe God will show up and help me. No. We need to be sure. If we have trusted in God, if we're saved, means we're not trusting in our goodness. We're trusting in the fact that Jesus died on the cross for us to pay our sins. If we've done that and we ask God to help us, he will. This day will the Lord deliver thee out of mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from me, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give you into our hands. Verse 48, and it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came to draw nigh to meet David, and David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out, and slew him, and cut his head off. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. They were trusting completely in this one man. Now, one man let them down. They hadn't counted on the Lord. I'm certain you saw the more important truth of this exciting drama. In review, David had every right to be terrified, but his first response was for others. Let no man's heart fail. Second, anger that this heathen non-believer mocked and defied Israel. I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, he said, whom thou hast defied. And his final thought was, my God shall be with me as I fight for my God and nation of Israel. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll think about this and read these verses and see that, when there's an action story, we look at the action, but there's important things going on within that story. And just look for the deeper things that you can apply to your life. Thanks for listening.